Hey everyone, I'm here at the Open Source Summit in Dublin, Ireland, and I have a little news for you. For the past several weeks, we've been talking to founders. As you well know, we're doing this Tech Founder Odyssey series. Well, now we have some new hosts. Colleen Coll and Joslyn are taking the reins. They have a great style, very much down-to-earth interviews with people who are telling their stories about being founders. These are people who are engineers by background, software developers, people who really have stories to tell about how they came to where they are today. So check it out, the Tech Founder Odyssey series on the New Stack Makers with Joslyn and Colleen Coll. You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more conversations and articles, please visit thenewstack.io. Now on with the show.
Hi, and welcome back to the New Stack's latest podcast series, the Tech Founder Odyssey, in which we speak with some of the most interesting tech startup creators in the cloud-native industry. I'm Colleen Coll of the New Stack with co-host Heather Joslyn. Heather, how you doing?
Hey Colleen.
Today we have the pleasure to talk with Brian Douglas, founder and CEO of Open Sauce. Open Sauce is an open source intelligence platform available for developers who have an interest in contributing to open source. And he founded it this year. We'll be asking Brian about the process of starting Open Sauce and how his journey has unfolded. But to set the stage, Brian has a history of advocacy for open source and breaking its barriers and gates so anyone can be awesome in open source. His startup began as a side project when he was director of developer advocacy at GitHub, and he also led developer relations and front-end development teams at Netlify. Brian, welcome, and thanks for joining the conversation.
Thanks for having me. Long-time reader of the New Stack, and happy to be on the podcast.
That's awesome. Now, tell us more about your roots in technology. I mean, what brought technology to you when you were a kid? What was your first computer?
First computer, man. I think I had a Packard Bell as like the thing I really cut my teeth on, doing like Encarta, like Windows 95. But honestly, like we had a community, like in my apartment complex, we had a community center. I don't know what computer was in there, but it ran DOS. And so I got to touch a computer pretty early in life, and got to play like Wolfenstein and eventually Doom and Duke Nukem and stuff like that. So that was my first sort of like touch of a computer and actually knew what I was actually doing.
Oh, that's fantastic. But we noticed that in your Twitter feed, BDougieYo, or is it BDougieYo?
BDougieYo, yes.
I like that. You have the following tweet pinned to your account. Life update. I'm working on Open Sauce full time starting today, dated June 10th this year. What was it like coming to a full stop with the being an employee to CEO?
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. You know, GitHub's a great company to work for. It's a great job. I got to talk to like the most prominent engineers in the space. Got to talk to all the top open source project maintainers about GitHub and what features are missing. Got to work on features like GitHub Actions, Code Spaces, Copilot. Was there for all those features to launch. Also was pre-Microsoft acquisition. It was a very cushy job. Like I had come from, like I mentioned, I lived in an apartment complex that didn't have a computer. We had a computer in the community center. So like I didn't grow up from money, or like I went to a safe state school that was driving distance to work from home. So to start my own thing and like leave all that, it was a big leap. But it's something that I've got a lot of conviction in. Open source is the reason why like I had the job. It's the reason why I even like learned how to code. It's because people are putting out stuff out there for other people to find, blog posts, libraries on GitHub, on NPM. And I want to bring more people in the fold. Like that's the ultimate goal, is like make open source more approachable for everyone.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up just outside of Tampa, Florida, in a small town called Palm Harbor. I say that because like every now and then I run into some people, like even out here, like early Dropbox employee is from like the city over from where I grew up, and it's always fun to run into people who know where I'm from.
That's great. So you were trying to. I just want to sort of backtrack a little bit. So your GitHub, you're trying to make open source more accessible. I mean, is that the core? You feel like that is the core problem you were trying to solve, and what frustrated you about that problem that then drew you to it?
Yeah, so I mean, our mission is empowering the best developers to work in open source, and the reason for that is like I spent a lot of time trying to encourage folks underrepresented to contribute to open source. So at GitHub, I had the opportunity to run this program called Floss and Code. So free as in Libre, open source software. Folks might know the acronym. Maybe it's new to them. But we did a hack day to teach HBCU students how to contribute to open source. And the way we did that is we had maintainers in the room showing them their projects, giving presentations, and then showing good first issues, showing how to use the product, how to just like locally run it on your machine, which is like the biggest hurdle for most people. It's like I can use this thing, but I didn't know I could run the development version locally, find bugs, and go fix them. And like my intro into tech, like I had a finance degree, 2008, the last recession, ended up getting a sales job because finance was not hiring with people with no network. And that's what I had. I had no network in finance, got the degree, decided to go into sales, did really well in sales, but I wanted to build stuff. I had always been like a copy and paster, would love doing DOS games, eventually got into MySpace, built out a pretty nice MySpace profile, if I could say. But yeah, so like my intro was like, someone told me, hey, you could actually build stuff. You could actually build apps now. And like post Web 2.0, like now people have frameworks and Rails and Django. Well, you just have to run a couple scripts and you've got a web page live and put that on Heroku or another server and you're good. And that opened the world to me. It's like, I have tons of ideas. Like I love the web. I love the internet and I love building on it. And now I can build my own stuff. And I just want to bring more people in the fold. So like that was my ultimate goal, is bring more people in the fold. But there definitely is an issue of like not every repo is taking contributions. No one knows where to start. So I'm currently spending my time talking to maintainers and companies on how to set their projects up for success and also scale their engineering teams through open source, either through hiring or just having contribution or contracting.
And speaking of finance, I know it's often a struggle for founders in the beginning to seek funding, and you had that background. What has it been like so far? And you're pretty new at this. I mean, it being founded in June. And any advice seeking funding for aspiring entrepreneurs? And also notice that you have an MBA at St. Leo University in Florida. Do you think it's helped you as a CEO, give you business cred with potential funders?
In short, probably no. It's a small school. It was also close driving distance to my house. Like that's why I did it. My sales job paid for the MBA. So, but I would say the skills I learned while getting the MBA has helped me tremendously in my career. So, talking to that, and I'll get to the funding thing in a second. But like my first startup, like second startup I worked at was Netlify. I was employee number 3, worked as an engineer. And because I had a business background, like in my interview, it was like we had coffee and they were interviewing me and I was like, I didn't know what to interview. And then like right in the interview, I'm like, oh, you just meeting all your customers? Because I was a big customer of Netlify at that point. And I was a big free customer at that point. I was not paying for the product. But they're like, no, actually raise funding. We want to hire you. And I was like, oh, cool. So I ended up turning a 30-60-90 plan out for them, like off the top of my head. And like the stuff you learn going to business school, getting an MBA. So I spent a lot of time like developing strategy and like doing content creation and doing marketing things while also shipping front end code. And it's because I love doing it. That was my background. I just happen to be writing code now. And so I was able to get a lot of exposure in the startup scene to eventually get a job at GitHub and then eventually start my own thing. So fundraising, like when you go into it, and like I didn't approach this. I bootstrapped the product, open source project. It's for the past 2 years at GitHub had like a lot. At the point, it was like probably 300 users that were using it. We're now up to like 1,000 at this point. And hopefully soon it'll be way more now that we have like a proper product around it. But what I'm getting at is like the fundraising, the way I approached it is like I just asked a couple friends who I knew were at VCs or former colleagues at GitHub and gave them a pitch. And they gave me very strong feedback of like, this is not a great pitch. So I was able to like refine the pitch and then actually figure out like, do I need to take money? Can I continue to just bootstrap and quit? And it just came down to I have a family, still have a family, and I wasn't at a point where I could go, work for $0 on a cool project and hope for money to come later. I'm a very conservative person when it comes to finances because I didn't have a lot growing up. So now that I have a bit more, I do take a salary and was able to raise through some angels and former GitHub employees who believe in me and help support this.
So you waited till you had the funding in place before you didn't just sort of leap into the unknown, sort of? Yeah.
And that tweet that you referred to earlier, Colleen, was like, that was a day where that was my last day. Like I had secured funding, had a bank account for the business, and made the leap comfortably into moving into a smaller salary, but still taking a salary.
Was GitHub, when you were working on this project at GitHub, did you have to, were they really supportive of it, or did you sort of have to carve out time amongst other
Yeah, it's
duties?
a great question.
Yeah, so I've always operated as a do first and ask for forgiveness later type of attitude. Like I learned how to code properly when I was 27 years old. So like I already had a whole career. I had grown to basically senior IT consultant, which was like staff level salesperson at a large company. And so like I knew what I was doing, and I had a fallback plan if like they're like, oh yeah, sorry, you can't work here anymore. So like my entire career, I've always carved out Fridays to be like, I heard the whole open source Friday thing. Mm-hmm. So Friday afternoons has always been like, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go contribute to open source. I'm going to go read Stack Overflow, learn more about how to grow as a developer. And like it's definitely a privileged position to be in, to be like, hey, I've got a relationship with the people I'm working with. They know I'm getting my work done Monday through Thursday in half of Friday. Like I can give time to myself to learn and educate myself. And I encourage everyone, you should definitely have built into your week learning. It's not even just open source. It's like, go read a blog post, go read a book, like build that into your week. Because otherwise, if you're not learning, you're not growing, and like eventually you get stagnant. So at GitHub, they have inside of their employment contract is a moonlight clause. So because GitHub they're powered by open source, and a lot of the home of open source is GitHub. So for that reason, like they can't say, oh, everything you work on we own type of deal. Because like if you do open source, does GitHub own that? And that it's like a weird. So basically, whatever you work on, as long as if you're not competing directly against GitHub, rebuilding GitHub from the ground up, feel free to do whatever you need to do. Moonlight, have a whole nother business. I had a coworker who was a carpenter. Had an entire carpenter business.
Wow.
And would like do renovations and stuff like that in houses. And quite a few other GitHub employees had like other things they did. Mm-hmm. So what I did, starting in 2020, like I'd worked on open source pretty consistently the entire time I worked there. But 2 years into the job, 2020 hit, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm at home. I guess I'm gonna try out streaming. So I'd streamed like right before the pandemic had started, because we got wind of the the pandemic happening, because we were traveling and there was a lot of questions, and like we just assumed things were going to get shut down. Mm-hmm. So like in January, end of January, I started streaming twice a week on open source in the open on Twitch. And the reason for that is because I didn't have a job where I was full-time coding. I was writing sample example projects for Actions and other things at GitHub, but I wasn't on our product team. So I wanted to build a product. I wanted to keep my skills keep them up, mm-hmm. and like know what was out there. So open source became that sort of platform for me to just keep learning and keep shipping code. So for 2 years, like I created authentication in the app, and then grew a community in a Discord, and then eventually built features based on user feedback. Mm-hmm. So to answer your original question, like GitHub knew what I was doing. I would actually use open source as like a platform to talk about Actions. So like a lot of my DevOps and automation, like it's all built in open source as org. So I built like a Twitch bot. When you live stream on Twitch, the first thing you do, sort of like building your lightsaber as a Jedi, is to build a Twitch bot. And I built that, hosted on Azure, powered by GitHub Actions, and it became my Microsoft Build Talk in 2020 and in 2021. So yeah, everyone at GitHub knew what I was working on. They knew I was a pizza person. I was coined the term Beyoncé of GitHub for other reasons, but like
Beyoncé of GitHub.
My role is like always to have an example ready to go, and open source became that example, that sort of repo to pull from.
One of
So
the
what is-
roles at GitHub, oh, I'm sorry, Heather, was, I think it's labeled ERG, and we are assuming that's the Employee Resource Group, is?
Yes.
Okay. And that involved your efforts to increase representation of Black employees, and also while connecting Black communities to opportunities in tech. How are you leveraging this for open source? Are you using the same strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, and I appreciate looking at my background because I don't really get a lot of time to talk about my work with the Black Cats, it was the first employee resource group at GitHub. So GitHub growing, like I joined when it was like almost 600 people. And the Black Cats was the first ERG at that time. In 2017, they got started. And yeah, the focus there was like, we just wanted to make sure people had a home, like a community of belonging. If you're a Black employee at GitHub, like you have a space to kind of, and it was very helpful. Things like 2020 during George Floyd, like it was the community that we all supported each other during that situation. It was also, I got to work on things like the master domain default. So I was part of that cohort strike team to like talk through like, do we change the default? How do we approach this? How do we follow what Git did earlier that year? So when open source, like it's always been trying to get people more in the fold. So attaching contributors to contributions to repos, it's really easy when you already find an existing community. So like Black Girls Code, like go speak and attend and participate in that industry or that community and say, hey, open source is a pathway to level up your skill. I actually, in the next week, I'll be speaking with Andela, which is a place for scaling talent from Africa, and teaching them and training them on open source and how to get first contributions and how to like approach like in a way that's sustainable. So like not spammy, but approach a maintainer and say, hey, I'm interested in participating. I'm joining this community. How do I get involved? Like that's all education that just needs to be out there. And I think a lot of times with the focus of open source being so much on like, there's like the top maintainers, like you just know who they are, whether it's Python, JavaScript, .NET, like you know who the people who speak at the conferences all the time are. And there's room for new people to come up in the fold and hear new stories. And so in open source, like our approach right now is that we're indexing Git repos. So we don't have to go in like the super details of it, but like we clone and fetch and then transform the data into a relational database, and then we provide insights on top of those repos. We can also, based on the open and public Git data, we can identify user IDs. And these user IDs might be like you can find out the top 100 or the up and coming contributors in the industry based on language or framework, and that's where we're headed. So then we can you can create an open source profile and have a rank or your sort of track record or resume attached to your contribution. And like I do want to point out, like open source is not the only way to get a job. It's not a place that people are using heavily to get a job. But I'm just looking to provide more exposure because at the end of the day, if you could show how skilled you are based on your contributions, that you can work with a public team that supports tens of thousands of companies that rely on this open source, like that's a great thing to put on your resume or your cover letter.
Are you finding it, because I know that you have this huge advocacy for, when you're finding people to do these talks like you are coming up with the group in Africa, do you find a lot of imposter syndrome? Because I was listening to one of your podcasts where that seems to be a thing, but it sounds like that you're more of a cheerleader or an advocate to almost like an open source whisperer, if you will, to make sure that people are awesome on the internet and making open source as as positive and just to for the community's sake.
Yeah, I mean it's I guess I would call myself a whisperer. I feel like I was I was like the champion of so many different people at GitHub. I definitely, like I joked about being the Beyoncé of GitHub. Like my job, and the reason for this, I did a DevRelCon talk about how to manage community at a scale of GitHub. Like at the moment, 84 million developers worldwide. Like how do you even approach that? It's a great problem to have. But at the end of the day, like Beyonce has a super fan group, which is called the Beehive, or the Beehive, and the Beehive goes to bat for Beyonce. So if Beyonce makes a country song, like the Beehive is there supporting her country. If she starts doing the house music, which is her latest album, she has a lot of house songs. Like people are there in support, and to the point where like you cannot say bad stuff about Beyonce, or the Beehive will come out and support her. So like when she had her twins, everyone had a comment about her body figure, and the Beehive will come to bat for that individual, for Beyonce. So like what I'm focused on is like we having strong community and having strong ties to community, whether it's Andela or whether it's the JS Foundation. Like it gives us an end to find out like what are the needs. So like at the JS Foundation, they have a lot of projects that have been around for a bit, like jQuery, that could still use support because it's still maintained or still like leveraged in large corporations. So my pitch to them, which I didn't follow through on like whether this was connected, but like they wanted to see more diversity in contribution inside of JavaScript projects. So my pitch to them was like, when you do a polyfill or you ship a new feature for JavaScript, why not reach to Black Girls Code and be like, hey, why don't you guys build something in the temporal library, which is the datetime library that came out last year? Why don't you build something based on this polyfill? And then now you're educated on how JavaScript migrates features along the path. But two, now you have experts who are literally people learning how to code, now are experts in cutting edge technology inside of JavaScript. In 2 years, that will be the norm. That's how you approach JavaScript. And now you have people that in 2 years, now they're not only educated on cutting edge features, they're educated in JavaScript in a way and mentorship directly from the people creating the language.
I have a question, like the brand you mentioned before we got on here. You talked about the pizza being being part of the brand. How did you sort of arrive at establishing a brand or deciding on what your brand would be?
Yeah, it's funny. It's it's like the age old thing. Like you if you want to start a band, you create an album art first before even like making music.
Did not know that.
Yeah, it's like I played music in high school and stuff like that, and like we had dreams of being like bands and artists, and you spent way more time on your name and the logos and stuff like that. And I think it's the same thing with code and open source as well. So long story short, Dot Pizza became a TLD in 2016 or 2015. I had this project. I was as a CRM tool to track my open source contributions. It had no name, and I ended up grabbing OpenSauce.pizza as like a fun gimmicky name, and then it attached itself to what I already had. So I have a ton of names for like quick side projects. Like I've got the Slaybot, which is like it's like the Baybot. So Baybot is my original Twitch app. It's an open source bot to teach you how to build Twitch bots. Mm-hmm. And then Slaybot's the one I actually use. It's like the Baybot, but slays. And it legitimately slays because it does a lot of cool things. Like when you start a repo, animations show up and said, thank you for the GitHub star. But yeah, so the brand pizza, it is something that sticks. It's memorable. And it's not something I get a lot of pushback on. So, yeah, I like to join conversation like this and like, yeah, I'm the pizza guy. You might not remember my name or my handle, but you do remember pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah, your logo is right there, right beside the name.
So the would-be founders out there, if you're collecting domain names, they will come in handy one day.
Yeah. I collect quite a few. I had to get rid of quite a few of them because I realized I probably will never use them. So if anyone wants mutualfund.io, it's now available.
That's good fun.
Are there anything? How many people are working? You did just start in June as a full-fledged company. What is anyone else working with you right now? And if so, how do you persuade them to join you?
Yeah, so I've got at this point 5.5 people working with me. So I've got 2 other employees. So I convinced one of my friends who does YouTube content and marketing and operation, project management, sort of like the jack of all trades. That's everything except coding. Joined me, and when I started full time in June, and they help run our YouTube series, which we interview. It's called The Secret Sauce. We interview open source maintainers and founders about their strategy in the open source. I've got another full time engineer based out of Alabama, Brandon Roberts, who joined me earlier this month. to take off some engineering and help spread some bandwidth. And then we've got two other folks. Who one is Ted, who's based out in Romania. He's been contributing to open source for a couple years now. I had to bring him on because he knows all the knowledge of the code base. I'm like, yeah, we're doing a thing. Please join. We have a designer down in Brazil as well, who I found through Twitter, through open source, and he's been helping drive some brand. And we have another person who's part-time as well, just helping out to scale some brand and design stuff.
So how do you sort of? It's a challenge for everybody with with everyone working remotely. So many people still working remotely these days, and probably in some cases, in some companies, will be for, forever. But how do you build a cohesive sort of staff culture in that situation?
That's a great question, and that's something that I've been early at startups. So a part of that we're trying to do. We weren't 100% remote. We had half the team was in person at Netlify, my previous employer before GitHub. But GitHub also was remote first and focused. That was a 100% remote team. We basically have a standing meeting. Like it's very clear that having an all hands sort of like, hey, here's what happened last week. Here's the success. Here's what we failed at. Like that became like a standing meeting, and it wasn't always like professional hoity-toity. Here's slides and let's talk about metrics. It was more like, hey, how's everyone doing? Let's just make sure we check in once a week. And then we have some standing meetings for like just engineering. So like there's some things that were blocked on, or some approaches that I thought was going to be a good approach that turns out to be tech debt 2 weeks into the product. Let's figure this out. So yeah, we're still trying like figuring this out. We want to do like sort of in-person collaboration, like pick a city or everyone fly out, and then we have like a week of collaboration. Like those are things that really helped a lot at GitHub, because GitHub, it was part of one of their benefits, is they called them mini summits, where the entire team all flies to the same city. You have a week of planning and preparation, but also hanging out and getting to know people. Because like when you're only in Slack, asynchronous communication or Slack, you don't know tone, you don't know people's sense of humor, and it becomes like opportunity for people to like rub each other the wrong way. But when you meet in person, you're like, oh, this person's actually a lot taller in person than I thought. Also, they're kind of funny.
It sounds like, you pretty much have it together as far as putting together. Especially since it's such an early in the year. But have you, it sounds like it's a well-oiled machine so far from what I'm hearing.
Oh, well, thank you.
But have you had any setbacks or failures connected to the journey of starting open source?
Yeah, it's a lot of the like growing pains as you're sort of growing a team. Like my original vision is like, don't grow the team too fast. I think a lot of times startups or projects, they add more people than they can sort of manage. And I've seen this happen multiple times, and friends and other companies I've seen grow. So we've been very slow to add too many people to the team, though I would love to have a bigger team. I'd love to have more engineers, so please reach out. But yeah, we do like making sure that we hire the right people at the right time. Like I definitely have people who aren't shipping code who are working with me today. And that's mainly because I do know how to write code, and I can fill in those gaps. But I also realize as I'm sort of driving vision and strategy and like making sure issues are open and closed and milestones are made, that I can't always be the one to, fix that bug or ship the next feature. So I think only setbacks that we have is like trying to figure out, okay, should we really focus on revenue, or should we focus on growth and adoption and community? And I think that's something that's also, as an open source maintainer as well, so wearing another hat, like trying to get sponsorship and stuff like that is very similar to sort of raising revenue. A lot of folks, I saw at GitHub with GitHub sponsors, a lot of folks just like they found out you can join GitHub sponsors, but you also have to talk about the project and get it in front of people to actually get sponsorship. And it's like it's unfortunate because like GitHub would love to do more exposure and explore and finding and like pointing dollars to specific projects. But then GitHub becomes like a place of like they're the kingmakers or the royalty, divine inspiration to now these projects win, these projects don't. So GitHub's been very hands off on that approach. But it's the same thing when I'm like approaching open source. Like I have to I love joining podcasts like this, and I love like writing content and getting the story out in front of people. So that way it feels more organic and trying to do that stuff. So I think sort of we do have a runway because we did take some funding from angels. We also have a path to revenue. So I think the only setbacks is like, okay, like only so many months of this thing that can work out until we basically have to say we're done. So we need to figure out how we can make this sustain itself.
I noticed that the podcast, well, the secret sauce, the podcast and streaming is a major. Well, it seems like it's a big part of open sauce. Will you continue with that strategy? Bring in any other employees or personalities to help with that? I mean, it seems like it's your thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like the content creation thing is something I really, really leaned into during the pandemic. So I started streaming. I bought a camera to stream, and then turns out that same camera you can create YouTube videos with. So like I leaned in that heavily at GitHub. GitHub, the developer relations team, we took over the YouTube channel in a way that we could sustain and grow and share stories that we were doing at conferences. But the conferences stopped for like the 6 months into the pandemic. So we had to figure everything else out. So like, why don't we just bring people to us? Here's YouTube. So when we started open sauce, my vision was like, before we started shipping the new code, because we have a new platform inside opensauce.pizza, like we started working on that platform. But before we started, I wanted to validate the product and like go have conversations with people who would be users and contributors to this. So that's what the secret sauce became, is like, hey, let's just reach out to our potential customers and the people who are doing a good job in open source. Would they think open sauce would be valuable insight into what they're doing already? And like it's basically it's behind the scenes knowledge. Essentially, every time I have an interview with someone on the secret sauce, like we turn off the cameras and I give them a demo, talk about their problems. So, and I think the one thing about starting a startup is like you don't talk to customers enough. You never talk to customers enough. Yeah. So if I can manufacture a situation where I can do something that I can do with my eyes closed, which have a conversation with somebody else who likes open source, then I could also be like, hey, while we're here, do you want to see a quick demo of a feature, or you want to see some Figma designs? So that becomes like our funnel to get more attention and conversation around what we're building to make sure we're building the right thing. So to answer your question, like we'll eventually invite other folks. I've had other engineers and stuff like that join me to chat about our product and stories about we had a series of Twitter Spaces where we talked about Fang and how Fang companies are ruining open source. It's a strong statement, but it was based on a newsletter that the Pragmatic Engineer put out. Eventually, Google engineers get distinguished, and they can't validate doing open source contributions anymore because they have to solve business needs. And eventually, the business needs separate from where open source is headed. That was a summary of the conversation.
That's nice.
What's next for your company?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so we are. We're currently at the time of this recording, we're a day away from Hacktoberfest starting. So we've shipped our initial platform, the Insights platform, to index all of Hacktoberfest. The reason for that is I talk to DigitalOcean every year before they launch and help to make sure they're set up for success during the event. So that way, GitHub and DigitalOcean have a great month. Because if there's too much spam happening, not only DigitalOcean has a problem, GitHub has a problem. So what we're doing is we're finding out insights of one is spam. So if anybody's spamming multiple projects, at least we can all know, sort of like a block party, which is an app to find out people who are doing bad actors inside of social platforms or DMs. At least we can all be on the same page. GitHub has spam features. If you mark them as a spammer, everyone is notified internally at GitHub, and then they get marked internally to not interact with projects. That's something we need to educate more maintainers to be more vocal about, mark stuff as spam. So that's what we're going to be encouraging, but also encouraging where contributions happening. So it's nice to know that projects can now opt in to Hacktoberfest, but as a first-time contributor, where do I start? So if we could show you, hey, this project had 5 contributions, they're doing a great job. Why don't you go start here? Join their Discord, see how people are getting contributions, create a cohort. We're looking to partner with other folks like Virtual Coffee to have cohorts of folks to have conversations about how to do open source. And then eventually we want to share the story and develop the story of I'm doing open source. How do I talk about it? How do I share this? How do I add this to my resume? How do I present this to a prospective employer? Or how do I validate my current employer that I deserve a raise or I deserve more attention for the work I'm doing outside of work.
Well, I'm hearing, I mean, you're having these events, virtual coffee. Where's the pizza party? I mean, I expect this.
Yeah, so we do have pizza parties. Last summer, before I went full time, we hosted these live streams, very similar to Secret Sauce. So pizza parties are basically an opportunity for the maintainers to show all of our viewers and community members how to use their project. Because I found that as a missing piece. Like I find a cool project, but I don't know how to use it. There's no, like the README is missing. And the maintainer doesn't have bandwidth, but they do have an hour to sit with me and be like, hey, here's a quick demo of how to use this. Here's stuff that here's some like good first issues. Here's documentation that's missing. People are literally cloning and like trying to use it while we're on stream, and they're getting feedback and QA like on the stream. So the pizza party, that was like basically the structure. Unfortunately, I had to pause that because like live streaming with guests takes a lot of time. So hoping to bring back the pizza parties in the future.
Please do, and we're expecting our invites, right, Heather?
Absolutely.
So we're basically winding down the interview, but before we go, I mean, I have to know this. What is your go-to style pizza and toppings? Go-to.
Style and toppings. Okay,
Yeah.
go-to. Yeah, so I'm going to be ultra specific. So I'm in Oakland. There's a pizza spot called Carbone. It's right next to the lake, up in like the Grand Lake area. And people who are from the Bay Area, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But they do basically Detroit style pizza, which is like the pan, sort of like the thick focaccia bread. They have a great mushroom and garlic pizza. My kids love it. I love it. My wife she's okay with it. And so it's a fan favorite here at the Douglas household. So
It's
that's my go-to.
Is that what you said?
Carbone, yes.
Yeah, my next stop, I have to get that. So mine is margarita. That's my go-to. Heather, what about you?
I'm basic pepperoni and mushroom. That's my ideal.
Okay.
I'm
It's a good staple.
really getting hungry right now. But I wanted to thank you all for joining us on the episode of the New Stacks podcast series, the Tech Founders Odyssey. We've been talking with Brian Douglas, founder and CEO of Open Sauce, and how he created this company and what he's learned along the way. And I want to thank Heather for co-hosting with me.
Absolutely. Thanks.
And thank you for joining us, Brian.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Stay saucy.
I love it. And as always, thank you for listening to the New Stacks, the Tech Founders Odyssey. See you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.